Great, well, thanks for coming. This is actually the first time we're doing this workshop, so we're also gauging interest, so if you have any ideas about how to improve it next time, let us know. My name is Melissa Riggio. I'm a staff member at the Office of Global Education. I decided to make this because when I was a Georgetown student studying abroad, there are a lot of things that I wished I had done to improve my language learning or to make it just a little bit better during my times there. So here are student workers, let them introduce themselves and where they studied abroad and when they studied abroad.
Yep, I'm Anisha. I'm a senior in the MSB and I studied abroad in Comillas, which is part of the Georgetown in Madrid study abroad program. And I did that in spring 2018.
My name is Ilana. I'm also, well, I don't know if you said you're a senior, but I'm a senior in the SFS. And I did a second year, so I did a full year in 2 different places. In my first semester I was in Salamanca, Spain, and my second semester I was in Israel, Palestine. So.
Great. So you guys talk a little bit, if you have any, we're going to start off with your personal stories first and then go a little bit through the slides. You could add as you go along. Do you have anything to start off with that you think would, if you could go back and tell your past self what you could have done better for language learning abroad, what would you tell them?
I'm not sure because I actually was pretty happy with how it turned out. I think that probably one of the best things that I didn't know would make such an impact but really helped a lot was living with a host family. And this is something that was recommended to me for cultural reasons, like you would get to meet people's families and then you would just have more of like I mean, it's the same thing, a family environment, getting to understand some of the like holidays and traditions that people have, but that actually ended up being one of the main reasons why I think that my language improved, because my host mom was very open about correcting my Spanish. So in general, I would say that the people in Spain are pretty nice to people who are learning Spanish and correct you in a way that doesn't make you feel bad, and my host mom was especially good at this. So having that experience was definitely one of the main reasons why I felt that my language improved. So thinking back on it, I would have been even more inclined to do a host stay for that reason.
I think I would have just like done a lot more reading in Spanish because like I'm technically like they put us under a category of like heritage speakers. Like my family speaks Spanish, but my Spanish is like not like grammatically like very good. Like classrooms here at Georgetown, like the one Spanish course I took here was like difficult for me because like grammar structures I just don't really know them or like understand how to use them in English, let alone in Spanish. So yeah, I think like, and we kind of talked about it also in the presentation, but like the most natural way I think to like gain fluency like a native speaker is to just be like absorbing all of the like material that you can, and like reading I think would be something that I wish I had done because it's like, yeah, you start to see like how grammar actually works when you like read it. These are just some resources like before you do leave for your programs, which I'm assuming is in the fall. It's also a quote that we put in here, but like 4 months from now you will definitely wish you had started today doing all of these things. I know that's how I felt when I like first went abroad. Reviewing conversation skills can be as easy as just like getting like Lonely Planet. They're like these nifty little handbooks that have some really good also like YouTube videos, like just conversational skills, how you can use them and apply them. Again, absorbing all of the things you can be like listening to either music, podcasts, the radio, reading as much as you can, news articles like on a daily basis, short stories, or like find a book at whatever reading level you feel like you're at. Watching movies, reading subtitles also in like the target language can be really helpful, or trying to watch it without subtitles. Like all of these are things, Duolingo, like these are apps and things that you can like use for like an hour a day, and it can be like wildly helpful for you at whatever level you're at.
Listening to music is super helpful for Spanish.
The YouTube videos also you can listen to different dialects, which I know is really important for foreign languages, because you don't want to find someone who's regionally from there. Even their vlogs can be super helpful in hearing how they differentiate between what's taught in standard textbooks. So for this one, take advantage of the time that you have now at Georgetown, I guess the month you have left, until you go. And you can talk to your professors, and that's what office hours also can be for, is being like, hey, I'm going to XYZ city, region. Do you have any tips? Do you think I should improve what parts of my grammar? It can be kind of scary to talk to a professor and like to critique me on my language, like directly one-on-one. But if they're a good professor, they will know to like what you need to work on in order to do well abroad. Also, taking notes in the target language, especially for not your language classes, it's kind of, I know it can make it longer, but it can help you get in the mindset of like, even though I'm taking a biology class or I'm taking philosophy, you're going to be having to think about those topics while you're abroad in that language. You might as well start now. Great. So if you feel like you're kind of past the grammar point, but you want to get really good at the pronunciation, I really recommend those classes because I had to take them in French when I got past the grammar like learning point, and it really helped me focus on exactly what I was saying in a different like language alphabets that you can learn to exactly to the words. It also helps taking more advanced vocabulary classes like business Spanish or business Chinese or something like that. It's a lot more language target focused or vocab focused.
So this is the what we were talking about earlier, just like absorbing as much material as you can. We just wrote down a few ways that you can do that outside of the classroom in terms of like sitting down and like looking at like, instead of just like outside of practicing, like what you can do. And yeah, we just kind of like outlined how like cognitively it works as like a native speaker of the language when you're reading things, like you probably know, you like take the words in context, not really like word for word, which is like how we learn vocabulary with like flashcards or things like that. So to get to like the level of a native speaker is when you're like reading those words in context, and the only way to do that is to read and read and keep reading.
And something else I did was that when I was abroad, I had a little notebook with me that I'd write down words that I'd hear, like, what was that? And I'd write it down really quickly, look it up later, but I kept it in that notebook. I didn't erase it. So by the end of the semester, I had just pages of random words that I'm like, oh, okay, and I could see what they meant. And it helped just kind of see them. Every time I wrote down a new word, I had to flip past the pages of old words. And I really got to know those ones very well. Engage with your community. This is really helpful, especially if you're interested in volunteering or service learning. It's one of the quickest ways to get to talk to people in the target language outside of the academic classroom setting. A story on my end is that there was a local board game shop in Berlin that I went to enough that I got to know the manager. And one day I'm like, look, I can't legally work in Germany because I have a visa, but I will like to study under you as an unpaid intern to learn how to run a small business. And he was like, you're here all the time, so sure. So he like led me to the back, and I just started learning how to manage the computers, what like stock we did for the board games, how to make the sandwiches in the back. It was like one of my favorite parts of my study abroad experience that I had to initiate and do. So that was definitely like an interesting scenario, but even so, like if you frequent the same place, or if you always see a show at the same venue or something, you can start to just get to know people and talk to them. Food equals friends. So that's a tip if you are awkward and don't know what to talk about. Going out to get food will give you something immediately to talk about. So we recommend you try and like link that together, go to the same place at the same time in the cafeteria if you can, and you might just kind of grow a group of people that way.
I never ended up going to Conto Blanco because it's far, and I chose all of my classes to stay at the close one. But that cafeteria is really great. First of all, the food is good and cheap, and second of all, like usually there's the same people going at like the same times because of the way the class schedule works there. And so like just literally everyone there is so friendly. Just go up to someone and be like, oh, like can I like come down to the cafeteria with you or something like that, or like are you going down to the cafeteria, and like they're just like really that'll literally be it, and they'll adopt you. It's great. Yeah.
Study abroad is a good chance to be a little braver than you normally are. You can step outside of your normal self and just try and like push a bit, and that's an example of something that you can do that I think will really help your language skills a lot.
At Comillas, they're also like super used to having a lot of exchange students. Like yes, most of the classes are Spanish students, but there's usually like a good portion of the class that's international, so they're super like open to everyone like not having perfect Spanish or whatever.
On that note though, if someone just keeps responding to you in English, a phrase that I really used a lot when I was in Germany was, I'm a student trying to learn German. I really prefer if you can speak in German. Sometimes I was feeling really sassy, I'd say I don't know English, and they would just be a little confused for a second and then switch to German, which was very fun. So depending on what level you're at, you can just say, I'm trying to learn this, please respect that I am a student here doing this. Usually at that point, they will switch to the target language. And don't forget to look at your university website for volunteer opportunities and clubs, because that will really help you get your language up to a peer speaker level as your peers, because if you're doing the same thing every week with same group of people, it'll help you a lot.
Oh, there's this great thing that they have this opportunity where they pair you with, like, it's totally just through personal connections, but the director of the program in Madrid pairs you with a family who has like a son or daughter who's in elementary school and like learning in English, because what they have there is that they start learning certain language or certain subjects in English before they fully learned English. Just sort of weird, but like, for example, this kid that I tutored, he was like 9 and he was learning science but in English, so he didn't get what was going on, but our job was to like explain it to them in Spanish and then make sure that they understand it in English too. So like that was a great thing that I thought like helped a lot with my language skills, because I was like, okay, like this is in English, how do I like put it into Spanish for this 9-year-old kid, like making it really simple to understand. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Also,
and you get paid. It's good.
That's really nice. So before you guys go, do you have any last thoughts? Because we're going to have another person come in and continue, but they have to leave at 3:15. But anything else before you guys head out?
I think the most important thing, like when you are abroad, is engaging with your community. It's really easy to get like just talk to like Georgetown students or like other international students even. But like this said, like the most valuable part of your experience and the most you're going to learn from is going to be the people that are just working around you every day. And they're usually extremely kind and like welcoming and warm, even though you might stumble and be, so I think, just accept kindness where it is given and like embrace the people around you.
I'd say definitely don't be afraid to take the direct matriculation classes, like the ones where you're actually not in a class for international students, but in a class for the people of the host country. It's just so much different, I feel like. I actually did all of mine in direct matriculation, so I'm not 100% sure like exactly how the other ones went, but there were a couple that I went to like the first few classes and I was like, this is not exactly how I want to be spending my time abroad. It's more interesting because I feel like you get to learn an actual topic as well. Taking for example, like taking a Spanish class while you are in Spain might help you with your grammar, but it's, in my opinion, more interesting and useful to put your language in context. So the direct matriculation classes is a high recommend. And again, like one other small point for comillas is that you can have a tutor in each of your classes that like you can just pick a student from the class who you feel like is going to help you, and Georgetown will actually pay for them to sit with you for just like an hour a week and help you out. So that's super helpful, and that's actually how I made one of my best friends while I was abroad. And I also passed the class.
Alright, well, thank you guys. If you can go bring Amazing back. And also see if your university or program does that too. There's lots of little perks to providers and universities that you often just don't think about or don't have access to till later, so just double check with that. So you guys will be in areas where you're just in new parts of the world, maybe you've never been there before. It's very, very exciting to travel. However, we've noticed a definite drop in grades when a student reports that they travel a lot because they're not focusing on the language as much or they're not doing their homework. So do consider when you're bouncing around like 10 different countries throughout your study abroad that could negatively affect what you're doing. We think it might be a little bit better if you consider travel to maybe like nearby towns or cities within that country or within that language region. That can still kind of scratch your travel itch, but it'll even give you a different level to work with your language. Because, for example, I think what city will you be in?
He's not 100% decided. It could be either Beijing, China, or Taipei, Taiwan.
Nice. Okay, but big cities, right? These aren't small towns, and you're also in a big city. So the thing you run into a lot is that almost everyone will either be aware that you are you can speak English, or they will try to just kind of assume that, not assume the worst of you, but they'll assume like, oh, it's not worth talking to him because his Spanish isn't good. But if you're in the countryside, they have to speak Spanish to you, or they have to speak Chinese to you, and it's a good way to get your language skills prepped up. When I did a study abroad in Paris, I got a lot less language learning done than when I did it in Bordeaux, which I was in a rural part of Bordeaux, like a 200-person town. So my French just got exponentially better because I'm like, no matter what, I know my accent's bad, but you have to talk to me in French. You can't switch out of it. Also, some of the best stories I hear coming back from other students is that they enjoyed seeing small, unknown to them towns in their country, and they said, yeah, I could have traveled like everywhere, but it was better for them to really get to know their country well and come back and be like, I got to know France or Germany or China super well because I stayed within the country and kept using my language skills to get around. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah,
Also introduce yourself and where you went.
I'm Nazia. I'm a sophomore and I studied abroad in Barcelona over the summer. And before I went, my language skills were not like up to par as like they are right now. So I'm definitely grateful for my time. But being in Barcelona, it was definitely like somewhere very touristy. So like when we'd go to the market and speak to them in Spanish, they would recognize our accents and try to switch to English. And a lot of times we would, like personally, I would just say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm on a program and we had to sign a language pledge and we have to speak in Spanish. So like if I make a mistake, just please correct me while saying these things in Spanish. So yeah, that's something I think you run into in like more touristy areas or just like places where it's more common to speak English if they think you speak English. But when we went to other places in Catalonia, like Girona, no one spoke English really. Like they really spoke Catalan and then they also spoke Spanish later on. And so in places like that, it was so much easier to just like speak Spanish. And like I think certain programs, like I think Salamanca, like it's easier to speak Spanish than maybe, and like it's easier in more rural settings rather than kind of city.
Yeah, because the more also rural doesn't immediately mean not touristy. There might be a really big attraction there, and therefore everyone speaks English to try and get the tourists to interact a little more. But if you go to areas that just don't, your language will improve. So consider, obviously everyone wants to see really famous cities around them in their side trips, but do know that there is a definite correlation between poor grades and lots of travel. And also staying within your country and practicing your language will improve it more than going outside of it and having to switch to English to do your country hopping. All right, building a relationship with your host family. It's an interesting experience because unless you've done this before, you'll never quite have a family like this again, where and you can speak on this because you did one too, right? Or?
I didn't have a host family, and like I'd love to like speak on like not having a host family.
Okay, so I during my study abroad did not have any host families because I did it back in Georgetown, had different programs, so I really wish I did. So the times I did get to experience a host family was actually on my own personal stays when I went through various agencies and stayed in different areas. But be sure to establish ground rules about correcting language, as we heard that the one host mom was very quick to correct. If you're like a little bit sensitive about that, or you just don't really have that quick correction, let them know. But if you're like, hey, just go really hard and correct me, I want to get really, really good, let them know that too. Just be open and honest. Going to them to do quote-unquote mundane or boring things like groceries or laundromat are really good times to improve your language. And also offering to help will just get you more involved. So if you want to pick up the kids from school, or maybe increase like the time you spend with them, helping with the dishes after dinner or something, it really will help, and the host family will definitely endear you to them. Obviously within cultural norms, understand like, personal boundaries or questions or anything, but really use the host family if you can. I think the times I did do it in a non-traditional way were really helpful. But what do you think?
I definitely, part of the things that like I wish I would have done was go on a program with a host family, just because I feel like talking to other people, like they even said that in some of the programs, like their host family cooks for them, and so like they would offer to help cook with their host mom, and that like helped our relationship. But I think without being in a host family, something that was helpful for us in our program was we did these things called intercambios, and what we would do was we would get to meet bi-weekly with, or twice a week actually, with students that attended the university there, that we were attending as well, and so we got time to go out and explore the city with them, and we would form relationships, and that was helpful because like they would like correct us when we were speaking, or if we would use like certain words that like we think are common, like we were using a specific word for homework, whereas they were saying, okay, we have no idea what you're saying. No one uses that word here, like you should use this. And then also just like being aware that, I guess, think culturally things are different sometimes where you go, or like what's okay to talk about. So I don't think I would like just like say, oh, what's your political stance, like right off the bat. Whereas like when I was there, they were very like into like talking about politics and like really saying, oh, what's your political stance? Well, what about this policy? Well, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And just being aware that like there may be different ideas or different
Boundaries. Yeah. However, that can be one of the best ways to engage your language, is learn how to say, I don't know how to talk on that topic, and I'm not equipped for this, or be like, not equipped for this, but here's my idea. Just kind of see what happens. Staying motivated. It can be kind of hard, especially during the slump period that all study abroad students have, yes, even you, where like it's been a couple of weeks, like, oh, this is just my daily life now, and it doesn't feel quite as exciting anymore. You have to stay motivated. Getting a language buddy in your university or your program probably can hook you up with a sort of system that'll do that. Hold you accountable, and maybe have a friend in the program who's also like reading the same books as you. Be like, okay, we're reading this book together, we're gonna go through it. Write down the task. Don't just say, I'm going to become fluent, because that's just impossible to conceptualize when you're first starting out. Just say, I want to sit down for an hour a day and speak with someone. Even just go a whole day, no English, as much as you can. Obviously, if your mom texts you, you can respond. But be like, I'm just going to talk to everyone in the target language. I'm going to only read or only listen to target language music. And just really put yourself in like the tiny goals like that. Don't make them too big, or else it'll be overwhelming. And a conversational goal. Be like, I want to be able to talk really deep politics by the time I go, or I want to describe what I saw in the news last night in perfect detail. Something like that is a much more attainable goal, and you probably can do that by the end of your study abroad. Yes, this is one of our student workers who went to Prague, and then she had not known any Czech before going, and then she said that she just kind of felt vindicated when a woman asked her for directions, and she just gave it to it, and it felt like this very good moment. And hopefully by the end of your study abroad, you'll have a lot of those moments. Self-care is the best care. So don't stress out if you kind of mess up or you just slip back into English a lot. This is more of just general like advice, but just keep true to yourself in a totally new environment, because it can be kind of identity shaking to be in a study abroad. If you've never lived abroad before, it can be really jarring at first. So we just kind of recommend these things, and don't feel too hard on yourself if you aren't achieving your language goals. Just keep persisting at it. Resources. So there's a lot of these, but I added a few that I use on there. I use Lingodeer for Japanese, as well as Kanadra and Infinite Japanese. I've heard really good things about Mango. Lingotopia is a video game you can play where you're walking through a city and trying to like understand what's going on. You just slowly learn how it goes along. Use the school library and the city library to find books for you to read. Just make sure you return them on time, because the fine policies surprised me when I went to Germany. They're much quicker than here. Read news articles. It's also good to see them from a different perspective, especially when there was all the wiretapping scandals going on in the U.S. German newspapers had a wildly different take on it, and I was just like, ooh, this is fascinating. And as we said, listening to music is almost the best way to, I think it is the best way to get the words and pronunciations in your head. And if you can't find music in your target language, look at what their top 40 is. It may be a lot of American songs. You may find some hidden gems in there, or type in musicians from and pick a city in your country, and that'll really narrow it down to probably ones that sing in the target language. So now you'll wish you had started today. So that's all the content we have for this. Do you guys have any questions or just kind of discussions or things you're thinking about?
I am from an area where Spanish is more prevalent, and I guess sometimes it can be like difficult to do so. One thing that, like, I don't know if you recommend, but like just kind of like pretending to interview people, like saying, oh, like I am doing this interview. Like I had like people that I was just like, oh, I'm like doing this for a school project, and I like interview you a little bit like in this like language or something like that. Also, I think like watching things as well, or just like speaking to yourself. I know that may sound
It sounds silly, but if you're like writing stories in your target language, you just be as creative as possible and doing the things that'll help you achieve that. Also, Netflix has tons of new originals. I'm not being paid by them, I just like their originals. And a lot of them are in not American contexts. I think there must be some Spanish ones on there now.
Yeah,
too.
there's is it Cable Girls? Spanish?
Possibly. I know they added a lot of, I think there's a good amount of Chinese language ones now too. So I've been enjoying the Japanese ones, they're a hoot. So that's a good way if you really just kind of want to immerse yourself. And if you really want to challenge yourself, watch without the subtitles and see what happens. What words are you constantly missing? Also, local libraries have language groups a lot. Look into that. There's no doubt an English exchange program going on with immigrants in your area that want to do both. So if you can't have that, I think I also had I think Mango and was it Lang 8? So it's Lang and the number 8 you can interact with people. So check those out too. But I really recommend doing in-person ones. Again, library, local schools or something like that. This is going to sound really dumb, but hear me. If you type in your city name and then Spanish learning or Chinese learning or adult classes or something, they might just have conversation groups that you can do. So it'll feel like there's a gap in between learning, but if you actually like put your mind to it, it's like, hey, for an hour a day, I'm going to sit down, put aside my phone, and focus on Spanish or Chinese. You can totally do that.
Also, the like news thing is definitely like very helpful. I think that's something that really helped with my language to make me feel more comfortable speaking, because I did like study abroad and I did like take classes that were completely in Spanish, and I think listening was very helpful because that helped my listening get up. But I think something that also helped with my speaking and like my vocabulary was just like reading a lot, because then I saw how a lot of things were structured and just was like introduced to a lot of words that might be more common. So like just like reading articles in Spanish and then summarizing them, like as if I was going to take the proficiency exam. I would just like read them and then like put it away and then just kind of like summarize the article or say, oh, like this article is about this and this.
Something that I realized as I was going abroad is that I had not learned the words for basic items. Like I just had forgotten what like sponge was or something like that. I'm like, I should know this, but how often do I use that in the academic setting? So if you want to go through and look up even like level 1 or level 2 basic vocabulary lists for household items, for commuting, things like that will be really helpful for you to feel like really with it when you first land.
Thank you for watching the Making the Most of Your Language Learning Abroad workshop. We hope that this information has been very helpful for you. We are the Office of Global Education. Feel free to contact us. We are located in Carr Barnes Suite 210. Feel free to email us at globaleducation@georgetown.edu or make an appointment at studyabroad.georgetown.edu. Our phone number is 202-687-5867, and feel free to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at GU Abroad in order to find out more information about different programs, as well as to stay updated on our events. Thank you.